Wuthering Waves 2.0 update doesn't just meet my expectations, it blows them out of the water. I was expecting excellence, but I wasn't expecting this. I'm at a point where I feel like it would actually be easier for me to compare this game to premium titles in terms of design and quality than its actual peers in the gacha space. With just one update, it now feels closer to games like Elden Ring than it does to games like Genshin Impact. For me, it's a wake-up call. I always had a benefit of the doubt sort of look at these gacha games. And so I would always have my expectations and even criticism somewhat tamed, as I wasn't really expecting much more out of these types of games compared to, like I say, premium titles. This perspective has changed with Wuthering Waves 2.0 update. These games are absolutely capable of being something extremely special. Today I wanted to give a brief first impressions of some of those elements that make me feel this way with Wuthering Waves' new update. I plan on making future videos going over in depth, but I wanted to give some quick thoughts on how I'm feeling currently. I recently completed the story, did some hologram fights and exploration, and I want to give some quick thoughts on those. When it comes to the story especially, I think this is probably their most competently written and presented yet, and I look forward to what's going to happen next even. A lot of this is because of the cinematography and animation work. These feel like actual cutscenes with characters moving and talking with a varied amount of animation. They're not just standing around and telling you information. A lot of the time, they're also showing it through subtleties of body language and facial expression. And then there's the camera work. There is a lot of use of a cinematic focal length and close-up shots throughout. There's consideration for not just the character's positioning, but also what's in the foreground and background. There are also interesting uses of the camera as symbolism, highlighting what the characters are saying through framing and scene setup. The combination of all this leaves nearly every shot feeling interesting and satisfying to watch. This is some of how you take advantage of that visual aspect of storytelling, and a lot of gacha games don't really do this as often as they probably should. Wuthering Waves has been decent at this, where there are remnants of this in some of 1.0 cutscenes, but I feel they've really outdone themselves this time around with the consistency and quality. There's very few Genshin Impact tier cutscenes, if any at all, where people just kind of standing around with stock animations for their default 1,000-yard stare until it's time to make the appropriate facial expression. The camera's rarely just stagnant and not doing anything to enhance the scene at any moment. And as a filmmaker, I really appreciate this and find it so good. It's crazy but not surprising to think that the devs will likely continue to improve too, given their track record so far. The world design is probably the biggest highlight though. This is the part that makes me feel like Wuthering Waves has gotten closer to the AAA space of not gacha games, but the realm of premium titles. The way it does this is through a combination of intricacy, artistry, and discovery. First off, the world doesn't just look good graphically, it looks good artistically. Everywhere I look could be mistaken for a painting if I was screenshot thanks to the finer details such as color and lighting placement. The atmosphere itself also changes between different areas. This was something done in previous regions as well, but here it's done to even greater effect with a higher level of detail and even imagination. Just on a visual perspective, traveling through this region feels diverse and complex. And even on a smaller scale, there's so much put together in terms of object density to make everything feel full and have a sense of belonging and flowing together. But that beauty of the new region is not just skin deep though. It's multi-leveled and has complexity when you go in and explore, hidden caves and shortcuts, areas that have their own environmental story to them and discoveries. Entire dungeon-like areas are hidden away, just like Pack in 1.1. They take the idea of making puzzles more environmental and seamlessly integrated into the world and expand upon them in interesting ways that make them feel even more like discoveries themselves that add to the immersion and highlight the journey. Echoes are playing even bigger roles in how you traverse and interact with the environment, not just puzzles. There are many boss encounters to discover as well as be ambushed by. Locations will change both aesthetically and in terms of what's to discover depending on the time of day. Mimics. I could go on in terms of just how dynamic this world feels on the gameplay level. Add on top the surprising variety of activities, and you have an expertly crafted world with a bigger emphasis on the discovery aspect and dynamic traversal. And that's the big thing there, the emphasis on discovery. It no longer feels like I'm just moving from one chest to the next for a gacha currency anymore. I'm now moving from one discovery to another. And that makes the world feel so much more memorable on a gameplay perspective. Oh, and of course the music is definitely great. I always thought Wuthering Waves had okay music with a couple tunes in 1.0 and was more consistent with 1.1 onward, but they've definitely knocked it out of the park this time around. The hologram fights are also their best yet. They do a good job this time around of having a bit of spectacle to define these boss fights as their own, on top of that added challenge. And the mechanic to make it where you and the boss are powered up as the fight timer gets closer to the end is a clever way to get past some of the gear check these can potentially present, and maybe some of the turtliness some people might actually try and get away with. A way of saying, okay, so maybe you don't have the gear, but do you have the skill? Overall, this update has been nothing short of phenomenal for me so far, and it's really heightened my expectations in what I can get out of these types of games. I do plan on making more videos going more in depth on the hologram boss designs, videos on the world design, and I may even do a story critique video as well to give a filmmaker's perspective on it. So if you want to see anything like that, it would mean a lot if you left a like if you enjoyed the video, and subscribe for those upcoming critique videos. Thanks for watching. Peace.